This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Allison Doss for the first time. Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you.
So I want to let you know, let the audience know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You probably see that icon up there that says listen on Newsly. For the audience, if they use coupon code GHOST, they can get 1 month free premium subscription. That's an audio platform, and we are a featured podcast on that platform. So later tonight, you'll be able to listen to the audio only version of the podcast there, as well as other platforms. But I want to let people know that. And then the other thing that we want to let people know today is we're actually at episode 998 of the Fam Electric Ghost podcast, tracking out on Apple Podcast. So thank you. And we're getting close to episode 1000. And we're happy to be on that track. We have your TikTok here. Now that's not clickable at the moment, but when we're fully published, that URL will be clickable, so people will be able to go right to your TikTok, the real boss Doss, and that will be something they can do when we're published on all the platforms. And today we're going to talk about your topic of rock bottom to radiant and letting go like a boss. So
Yes,
again,
sir.
thank you for being on the show tonight. And maybe you want to introduce the audience and kind of give your story, your backdrop, your whole your bio, however you want to tell your story at the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. So 7 years ago, I was homeless and I was living on the street. I was addicted to crack. I was prostituting, and I thought that was exactly where I belonged. It was just like the culmination and the tail end of an entire adulthood of recklessness and self-will and shame and guilt. I mean, it didn't start like that. It definitely didn't start like that. That was like, 25 years later. It all
Mm-hmm.
started when I was, 18 years old and living in Washington, D.C. I had left Louisiana, little farm girl with a population in a town of like 500 people. And I just could not be contained. I did not want my parents telling me what to do anymore. And I got the opportunity. I met a guy at spring break, and he was working at the OEOB and was like, hey, after spring break, you should come visit me. The poor kid had no idea that I was going home and packing all of my bags and never looking back to Louisiana. And when I got to DC, I was just amazed at the different cultures, the different looking people, the different accents. I had never seen or heard anything like it before. And within 2 weeks of moving to Washington, D.C., as I was, perusing the streets and, visiting the town that I'm now living in, the city, I was recruited by a man in a suit with a walkie-talkie to come in and meet the manager because I needed a job. And he called at me across the street and was like, Miss, come over here. Are you looking for a job? I'm like, yeah, I am, straight out of Louisiana. And he brought me into this place, and it was really dark. And as my eyes focused on what was going on, I saw this woman completely naked on the stage, and she looked like she had on a bikini, but it was just like really loud tan lines in the form of a bikini. Her nipples and her vagina were completely showing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I was intrigued. It looked very glamorous to me. And she had money all over her leg and her garter belt. And so one of the waitresses came over, and they recruited me to be a waitress at a strip club. I was 17 years old, straight from the farm. After about 2 weeks of being a waitress, I did not want the strippers bossing me around and telling me to get them drinks. They looked like they were having a damn good time, and I wanted to be a part of it. So I started dancing. I mean, if you can call it dancing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my relationship with alcohol began. And with alcohol was massive amounts of cocaine. And every night we would get off work at 2 a.m. We would go out to the clubs. That's where my love of house music began. So from the age of 17 until about 20 in Washington, D.C., I was a complete train wreck. And the alcohol and the cocaine, all it really did was accentuate all the anger that I carried around in my poor little body. And I was a crazy person. I would headbutt people, and any boyfriend I had, I would completely abuse. And if they didn't act the way that I wanted them to act, I'd whack them with whatever was in my hand. And somewhere in that time period, I met this girl, and her name is Kelly. And she came up to me one night, and I was so angry that the bartender wasn't giving me the attention that I wanted. And I was all coked up, and I needed a drink to calm down. And this girl comes up and starts twirling my hair around her fingers and goes, "Oh my gosh, you're so pretty." And I turned around, and my initial reaction was to headbutt her, because I'm just this angry, drunk, coked out fuckface. And she goes, "Would you like to take some E?" And I'd never taken ecstasy before. And this beautiful, blonde, like ethereal looking girl dropped a tab of ecstasy on my tongue. This is like 1996. So that changed my angry, cokehead tweak fest into like this new world of ecstasy and free love and fun love, and everyone loves each other. And she became my very best friend. Kelly was on board with doing whatever I wanted to do. She was just like my ride or die, my soul sister. I had never been in the presence of someone that made me want to be a better person. Like, people really liked her. They liked being around her. So I wanted to be like her. I'm like, wow, she's really nice. She's really friendly. People like her. I'm going to do more of that. So she and I ended up moving from DC down to South Beach, Miami, because I had this idea, coming from the farm, that I wanted to live in every major city for a year. So I'd done DC, I had worn out my welcome there, and now it was time for South Beach, Miami. So we moved down to South Beach, Miami. This is like 1996, when South Beach was fucking fun. I had no idea. Like, I thought that everyone around us was exactly like us, just party time. We're all doing drugs. We're all going to the house music festivals. Like, this is what we're doing. So she and I lived in Miami for about a year. I ended up having a house party. There were house parties every single night. But I ended up having one that I had distributed flyers out to the entire South Beach. I left them in the 7-Elevens. We're having a house party, random people coming to the house. And I'm so messed up that I have no clue who's in and out. So the house ends up getting robbed. The car ends up getting stolen. We figure South Beach is now dangerous for us. So we're going to move to New York City. So we moved to New York City. And with that, like, living in the East Village in New York City in 1997 is something that I wish everyone could experience in their lifetime. Like, it was just this very freeing atmosphere. Nothing else mattered except the party. We partied our asses off. I thought the coolest chick in the world would know how to spin records. So I started spinning records. I got turntables at the apartment. Everyone's coming over. There's a plate of Coke, a plate of K, a pile of ecstasy, vodka all around, bong hits galore. And that's how we lived for like the next 3 years. And it was a fun party. I wouldn't have changed it for the world. And then, the typical, I say the typical because in my life, this is the typical. At 24 years old, I get pregnant by my drug dealer, because that's the best case scenario. But I continued to run, rampantly with my drug addiction. We were still stripping. I have this kid, I have the drug dealer dad. I have my best friend, she's using. We were crazy people. And I just figured that this was exactly how life was supposed to be, because everyone in my circle did the same thing. Along the way, there was a lot of abuse in that relationship, of course. And my son and he was a baby. We were living in Chinatown at the time of 9/11. It was just, everything was just total chaos in my life at that time.
Yeah, it must have been hard at that point, because then the whole world changed. So did the party kind of change after 9/11? Did that party atmosphere go away?
Yeah, the party atmosphere went away, but my drug use continued. My alcoholism and my drug use continued. It's interesting because about the age of 28 until about 38, things are all a blur for me. You know, like I can be reminded of things. I had another child during that time. I was in a 10-year relationship, but my alcoholism and drug addiction run my mind. It ran it, you know? And sometimes I would have bouts of sobriety just because I would be threatened by the man that I was with, like, if you don't get your shit together. So 3 months would go by and then, you know, all hell would hit the ceiling. But during that time, I was living with a guy, my son's father. Like it's all just a blur. But I had gotten a phone call, and the phone call was coming in from my girlfriend Monica, and she's like, "Listen, you need to get to the hospital. Kelly fell." And I was used to getting phone calls about Kelly, my best friend, falling and having accidents because she was so fucked up on Special K and running around New York City. Okay. So there were always things happening. And she would fall and like get a scrape or a cut or something. And she'd run to the plastic surgeon and run out and just keep going. So I went to the hospital, and I was walking into the hospital room, and the doctor was walking out. And I said to the doctor, I'm like, did she mess up her fucking teeth? She just got $30,000 worth of veneers. She's going to be pissed. And he goes, we have bigger problems than that. And I walked into the room, and my best friend Kelly had fallen from the roof of her building in Long Island City. She was pacing back and forth, all messed up. And she tripped and fell over the edge and hit the awning of the Italian deli below. Oh, wow. And hit the concrete. She only had a gag reflex. Her beautiful blonde hair was crusted up with dried blood. She had staples going across her whole forehead, and her body was swollen like, I don't know, 5 times its normal size. And the first thing I did was get out my phone and turn on her favorite house song, her house music, and put it on her belly and grabbed her hand and started dancing. And the nurse runs in, and she's like, what are you doing? Stop. You can't have, her brainwaves can't take that. She'll seize. I'm like, but she loves this song. Just the crazy place I was in, you know? And I stayed with her in the hospital with her mom for a couple of weeks. And they ended up pulling the plug on her because she wasn't going to make it back. But she and I were both adamant organ donors. And so her viable organs were able to save the lives of 11 people. So that was an incredible gift that she was able to give. But during that time of like things being a party, although we weren't physically attending parties, the drugs still kept me in a party state. Around that time, someone introduced me to crack. And that's a whole nother world. The first time I smoked crack, I felt exactly what I've always been looking for. I was completely numbed out. I was drooling. My ears were ringing. And all I could think of was, I want more. Everything else fell away. And from that time, when that first started, I was on a mission to feel that way again. That was when I was living in New York. She had passed away. I had 2 kids at this point. Both of them during that time had gone to live with either of their fathers. I was by myself. I didn't realize how in pain I was because I was so altered all of the time. And I ended up, my oldest son's grandparents had retired down to Florida. So I was kind of doing the shuffle. When things got really hairy for me in New York, I'd come down to Florida and relax at their house. I'd get a little strength and I'd go back. Well, the time came where I stayed in Florida. And a couple of years after that, I found myself completely homeless, living in this area called Riviera Beach in Florida, which is just this really dark and hopeless hood. And I was prostituting and living on the street just every few days. When I knew my body needed to like lay down, I would find an abandoned house, someplace I could just get into and pass out. And I would wake up and my clothes would be gone. I had no idea who had been in the room with me. And this went on for like 6 months to a year when things just got really bad. And someone approached me and said, hey, listen, I know you're looking for a safe place to sleep at night. I have this friend, his name is Hollywood, and he lets girls like you stay at his house. It was a trap house, So I went to the trap house and I was there for a couple of days. And on like the second day, I hear this girl coming through the house going, where the fuck that bitch? I'm gonna kill that fucking hoe. What the fuck's going on? And I'm like, I'm the only fucking bitch or hoe that's here. She must be talking about me. So I come out of the room. I've got a lighter in my hand because I was smoking my pipe. I put it on the bed. I come out of the room and there's this little thing like charging at me. She's so tiny and I know her from the street and we've never had any beef, but she's charging at me, yelling at me, get the fuck out my house, get the fuck out my house. I look over and I saw a can of Raid sitting on top of a TV and I grab the Raid and I stick it up with the lighter. Like if she's coming, I'm burning. And the closer she got to me, I couldn't do it. I couldn't burn her face. And like in that exact moment, I realized that like I did not have what it took to be the head bitch in charge of the trap house. I didn't have what it takes, but that girl did. She jumped me and she cut my face. I have a scar right here on my face. She cut my face with a broken crack pipe. I didn't know she had cut my face. I was on the ground. I get up and there's a couple of dudes recording the whole thing. It was like a preemptive strike, and I'm seeing them look at me with these big eyes and I'm like, what? And they're like, yo, she cut your face. And I'm like, what? And just blood was all over my hand. And I'm like, is it bad? Is it bad? And they're like, yeah, it's pretty fucking bad. And I ran to the bathroom and I barricaded myself, in the bathroom. The door wouldn't lock, but I pressed against it really hard with my butt. And I just caught myself in this dirty fucking mirror and my face is bleeding. I'm dirty. I hadn't showered in days. And I'm like, how the fuck did I get here? And I looked down in the corner and I saw a dirty, crusty sock and I picked it up and put it on my face. And I just sat there with my ass against the door, looking in the mirror at myself and like what I had become. And I hear someone down the hall go, don't worry, Snow Bunny, she done, she got you. And so I walked down the hall and I grabbed a trash bag. This trash bag had the last belongings that I had accumulated over a lifetime. It was a couple of pairs of dirty shorts, a sock, a t-shirt. I mean, and I threw it over my shoulder like fucking poor ass Santa. And I walked to the nearest hospital. I was about 10 blocks from the nearest hospital. And this was July 4th, 7 years ago at noon in Florida. It was hot. And I got to the hospital and, they're trying to glue my face shut and that's not working because I'm like, and it's popping open. So they start to sew it shut and a policeman comes in the room and he's like, what happened? And I said, I fell. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't done yet. I wasn't ready to get sober. I just wanted to get this over with and get back out to the street and get what I needed to get to make myself feel better. I wasn't going to rat the girl out because returning to the street after you rat someone out, you're dead. I wasn't in a position to do that. So they sewed my face up. I went back out to the street and I'd always kind of put myself on a pedestal because as a prostitute, I wouldn't have sex. So I'm better than the other ones, but when you have, 9 stitches from here all the way down to the lip, my moneymaker was no longer in service. And the joke on the street became who's going to pop Snow Bunny's next stitch. This was the world I was living in. After a couple of days of living in complete fear that I'd never experienced before, my whole life, I'd been so arrogant that nothing really bad could ever happen to me. Although everything bad had happened to me, this was the kicker for me. I felt like a sitting duck. I felt vulnerable. And it crossed my mind that I might die out here because I had been physically harmed, and as the stitches were popping, I'm reaching out to people that I had known that just people that care about me, and I was given an opportunity to go to treatment and I went to treatment. I didn't want to, but I thought I might die out there. It was my only other place to get somewhere safe, So I went to treatment and I was going to try to be sober, but I didn't know how to do anything other than like make money with my body and smoke crack and drink and play cards. You know what I mean? Like, and so I went to treatment and I devoted to living in a halfway house for a year because I knew that I didn't know how to live with integrity. I knew that I didn't know how to do anything that was of value. And I knew I didn't know how to be sober and not drink. So my theory was if I just follow other women around that are doing this thing, then it'll rub off on me.
Mm.
Well, 2 months into living in the halfway, I met this guy. And immediately this guy gave me feelings of like the feelings I would get when I was waiting for the dealer to show up with my drug of choice. It was like titillating, exhilarating, exciting. And instead of focusing on my sobriety during my time in the halfway house, I began to focus on him. He was 10 years younger than me. He triggered something in me that was like a competition mode. I've always been like, if someone doesn't give me the attention, I'm going to get it, you know?
Okay.
And I knew that I could manipulate this with my sexual prowess. So that's exactly what I did. I kept showing up for the guy. I kept doing these outside the box sexual things that made him enamored with me. And we ended up staying together. I spent the year in the halfway house. The moment I moved out, we moved in together. I'm not working in an Alcoholic Anonymous program. I'm not doing anything for my spiritual condition. I am addicted to this guy and we are toxic. But because I'm not drinking, I think I'm all good. I think I'm healthy now and I'm willing to compromise and I'm willing to show up for this guy. And I had fooled myself that was what was happening. Along the way, there were behaviors that were shown to me by this man that I felt in my gut didn't feel good, but he was so flippin' hot and I was so in love with him and so addicted to him that I tolerated the behaviors. And those behaviors showed up in certain ways of like outside of the box things that didn't make me feel so good, like dressing him up like a girl and doing strange things, demasculating things. It didn't feel good to me. Like, and I thought it was my problem because I thought maybe it was triggering my life as a sex worker when I used to show up and pretend and act and do shit, you know? But I just knew that what was happening didn't feel right and it didn't honor me. But I'm like, fuck it, he's fine. I got this. And moving throughout the relationship, he had shared with me that he felt like he was gender neutral. I don't know what the fuck that means. I'm old. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like I've been on the street for so many years that like I don't know terminology.
You didn't pick up on that. Yeah.
I haven't been on social media. I don't know any of the woke shit at all. You know, I'm like, okay, what's that mean? And he's like, you know, I feel like I have some female qualities and some male qualities. I'm like, yeah, me too. Have you seen the fucking balls on me? You know? And it was just like in one ear and out the other. Little further in the relationship, he told me that when I go to work on Saturdays and he's home alone, he dresses up in my clothes in the closet. I'm like, well, you're all the way fucked up. So you're going to leave. We're not going to live together. You're going to get a therapist and you're going to figure your shit out and let me know what you find out. So a few months later, you know, he's like, I've been going to therapy. I don't know what I was thinking. That was some type of fetish. We get back together. There are no signs of anything going on. COVID hits. I'm not like, we're just spending all this time together. I'm like, oh, we should get married because things seemed really good. So we get married on the beach in beautiful sunny South Florida by ourselves with a photographer and an officiant. And I'm so in love. I'd never been married before. To me, men have been expendable my whole life. Like, don't need you, don't want you, get the fuck out my face. But this one was different. This one I could feel in my soul, you know? And we get married. We're very happy. He gets a job offer out in LA. And at this time, I'm working in a salon. I had started building a little bit of a business for myself. And we move out to LA because I'm a mover and a shaker. I love to geographically locate to different places. This has been something I've been doing since I was 17 years old, you know? So I'm traveling back and forth between LA and South Florida, seeing clients every 6 weeks. I feel like I'm jet setting. Life is so good. And when about 6 months into me doing the back and forth, some of those behaviors started like popping back up with my husband. And he wanted to, start wearing women's underwear. And he was like a bodybuilder. So I didn't really care because he looked hot in them. Didn't really like it, but in the scheme of life, who fucking cares, And so that kind of started, and then a few months after that, packages started arriving in the mail. Vintage lingerie, Victoria's Secret panties, bra sets, all this. And these packages were arriving. And when he would come home from work, take a shower, open the packages, try the stuff on and be like, no, this doesn't fit right. You try it on. And for like a week, I was playing along with this. And then finally, I'm like, listen, this isn't working for me. Like, if you ever want to have sex with me again, you're going to like cut the fucking shit because this isn't working.
Yeah, you had told him before, and then he still brought it back.
Yeah, because, you teach people how to treat you, you know what I mean? And I continued to tolerate the behaviors along the way, you know what I mean? Making him feel a bit more, him feel a bit more comfortable pushing the envelope, And I'm like, you got to stop wearing this. I can't do it anymore. And he looked at me and he was like, I really just don't think you should have control over what I wear. I'm like, you know what? You're right. No one should have control over what anyone wears. And I said, but there's going to be consequences to that. And so he looked at me and said, and just started stumbling over his words. And he had been going to therapy for a very long time. Because remember, I had told him a long time ago to fucking go to therapy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that had continued over the years. And he's, stumbling and stuttering over his words. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on? I'm like, fucking talk, And he told me, I think I might be trans. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? For someone that looked like that to be telling me that, it didn't make any sense. There was no gravity to it, And I'm like, okay, whatever. And like, what does that mean? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for us? And he's like, I just feel like, like I want to start taking hormones. And even that didn't mean anything to me because as a bodybuilder, you take hormones, you take all kinds of stuff. You're always putting a needle in your ass for your muscles. So I was used to seeing things like that too. That wasn't too far out. And I'm like, well, what's that going to do? And he's like, it'll soften my facial features. I'm like, whatever. Because he's like Buzz Lightyear, square ass jaw. Who cares? And he was just like, and give me breasts. And in that particular moment was the one thing that I could not say, okay, whatever. I felt my whole entire soul crack and crumble and hit the fucking floor and turn to dust. I was gutted because I could no longer live in the fantasy that this isn't happening because that physical alteration changed everything. Just the visualization of it.
Yeah, I guess he was telling you, but until you saw that he wanted breasts, that you didn't really connect the dots that that's where he was going, and you were missing maybe the signals that that's where he's going. But
that I was missing the signals in my head, but my body was telling me the whole time. My body was telling me, I could feel it. Something's wrong. Something's off. This doesn't honor you. This doesn't feel good. But I was just so used to just bossing my fucking reality around that I didn't take heed to that. I wasn't used to listening to my body. I had been in an altered state of mind my entire existence, so I wasn't used to that. So I did what any person I think would do in that situation. I just wanted it to go away and I would stop at nothing to make it stop. I shamed my husband, called him names, yelled at him, said the most horrible forked tongue, slimy things you could possibly say to a person. And I thought I could shame it away. Like, if I make you feel like shit about this, then you're going to do what I need you to do.
You wanted to control. Yeah, you wanted to control. Like you said, you had been controlling guys before they were, or being able to,
I
exercise like that kind of level of
mhm.
what you want. You try to force it.
I even thought I could suck his dick so hard I could suck it out of him.
Mm,
I was trying to manipulate with sex also. And when that wasn't working, when this like the next couple of weeks, this was still on the rise. It's like a moving train that wasn't stopping. Um, I'm like, okay, I'm leaving. I'm leaving LA. I'm going back to Florida. I'm packing my shit because I just knew that motherfucker would follow me back to Florida. And then so I come back to Florida. I mean, I was back in Florida for a couple of months and there was no budge on the I am transitioning. This is who I am. And I was so fucking mad that my body was rattling and shaking and volcanically erupting. I was an earthquake. I couldn't work. I couldn't talk. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do shit. I was so angry that something was more important to my husband than me. So what does
well, the
any
therapy
good
actually, yeah, it seemed like the therapy he actually took to heart and really discovered his truth, and that truth wasn't fitting your relationship anymore.
and what does any crackhead worth her weight in crack do when something doesn't go her fucking way? We smoke crack. So I relapsed really, really hard. And this is just 2.5 years ago. I was pulling on my crack pipe and blowing clouds into the FaceTime camera, blaming that motherfucker for my relapse. And my usual codependent partner said back to me, I do not take responsibility for your relapse. I was floored because we always took responsibility for each other and everything. We were so intermeshed and so codependent. I couldn't believe that there was nothing I could do. The relapse wasn't going to make it stop. Manipulation, shaming, leaving, everything I've always done to get my way was
Mhm.
motherfucking not working. I couldn't believe it. And here I am relapsing, destroying the life that I had created because my partner has come to their truth to be their authentic self.
I guess it's time for you to have your, that kind of, when you go through the crucible moment, like a crucible moment happened for him, and he discovered who his true self was,
Yes.
and then
So
that you hadn't yet found that yet.
I was making it all about trying to control it away and make my expectations be met. It was more important for me to control that because I mean, my last name is Doss, but I have Boss Doss on my knuckles, for God's sake. I am not used to not fucking pulling the freaking puppet strings. And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't working for the first time in my life. All of my methods. And I had no choice but to surrender. I had to surrender to the fact that this is a moving train and either I can get on board or get the fuck out. So when I ended up going back to live in a halfway house for a few months to get my footing back into the real world of sobriety. And during that time, um, I was mourning the loss of my husband, but I didn't want to mourn the loss of my husband. I thought to myself, how ridiculous that two people that love each other can't be together because one of them is transitioning into a female. I thought that something was wrong with me, that my ill acceptance of I couldn't do it. So something's wrong with me. I'm defective. I'm not evolved. I'm not spiritual because I can't see past the transition to the soul of my husband. There's must be something defective in the fabric of my cloth that is causing my body to reject what's happening. So I went on a healing journey to cure that because I just wanted to be with that person because I missed that person so badly. I
Mm.
tried every modality possible. I did the inner child workshops and I did psychotherapy and I did trauma therapy and I did hypnotherapy. I did all the fucking shit I could do to heal that gurgling going on inside that was rejecting and detesting what was happening with my husband. None of that worked. None of it worked. I had to come to the realization that letting go of my husband as her was the only thing that was going to relieve me of what I was feeling. And I felt like a terrible person for doing that because I didn't want to be a consequence for the new person. She had already experienced every consequence you could possibly imagine. Trans people don't have it easy, you know?
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
and I was taking responsibility for her comfort and taking responsibility for her happiness. I thought I was the one that had to offer that to her. Meanwhile, it was killing me. So I had to come to a point where I got brave and started investigating and stopped asking the question, like, why did this happen to me? Because, of course, this happened to me because I showed up to this relationship from a defected character. I was defected. I was controlling. I was manipulative. I was judging, self seeking, and selfish. I was exactly the fucking crazy addict. I was just without the drugs and alcohol showing up into a relationship, you know, like I
Mhm.
had no business being with this person at all. You know, the moment that there was turmoil or my needs weren't met or I was feeling something was wrong, if I was a person from a healed place, I would have been like, okay, this isn't for me. You're going to go your way and I'm going to go mine. But all of my defects were going fucking crazy. So I was going to make it happen. And when I finally realized that I'm the one that's responsible for my heart shattering into a million fucking shards, I'm like, how about that? And when I learned what I brought in there and how I could not do that ever again, I feel like I evolved into a woman of value and principles and someone who's not going to tolerate things that don't make my body feel good. And I don't have to investigate it and I don't have to dissect it. It just is. So that's like the growth that I've had. Of course, this happened to me. And I sit here today, 2.5 years later, a healed person and confident that moving forward in my life, when I do decide to date, which it hasn't happened yet, because boy, you're gonna have to be a magnificent motherfucker to come into my fucking orbit and get me to fucking go to dinner with you or even entertain. I have a slew of questions I need to ask. Have you ever wanted to wear your mom's underwear? Do you have unhealed trauma? You know what I mean? It's going to be
Yeah.
wild. But the person for me is the person that's going to answer those questions, you know?
Well, you have to know, like, when you get into, people wear masks, a lot of
Yeah.
times, and they even, delude themselves. Like you wear a mask until you find out who your authentic self is, right? A lot of times people are showing up because they want to, they're comparing themselves to other people because they have these limiting beliefs. It's like a lot of times, it starts with all that because you don't feel that you're good enough. And so then you follow down that road until you realize that life is pain, life is fear. Until you are willing to kind of deal with it and not numb it and actually learn from it, that's like the hard lesson that a lot of people have a hard time ever really figuring out.
You know, a lot of people, try when I, tell them the story and even along the way, my clients and friends and family and stuff like that, they're like, "Oh, he betrayed you." Like I really don't feel like there was a betrayal at all. I really feel like my husband showed up the best way he knew how. I really think that like there was an organic transformation and evolution that happened with like
Yeah.
the reality of, oh my gosh, I think I might be trans. Like that was, and my safety net of the love that I gave to this person gave them a safe space to like be themselves, and I don't feel like it was a betrayal at all, and like
But
it's
sometimes, yeah, people find themselves like if you tell somebody to go to therapy and then they go to therapy and then they take it, you know, they take a
and then they
honest
learn some
approach.
shit.
Yeah, they actually keep on doing it. They'll find out that who you first on the first encounter with that person. If they hadn't really been dealing with it, it's not that they betrayed you; they didn't even know it until they actually start to uncover it. And it was uncovering at the same time in a parallel state. So I can hear from what your story is. It wasn't betrayal. It's like that was like a discovery that was happening parallel to your situation where there's kind of codependency and you know because you didn't realize they were coming at you with that truth. and you were trying to like, well, that's not the truth. So and they're like that's not the truth, but they're telling you the truth, but that's not the truth. So that you can get the misfire, the miscommunication.
I have this little mantra that pops up on my phone home screen at noon every single day. And it says, when people show you who they are, believe them.
Yeah. That's a good truth because a lot of times people don't want that. Again, a lot of people feel that they can fix somebody, right? A lot of people feel that
Yeah.
what they show you, what they showed you on that first date is probably real. It's not fake. It's like, some of those things that start to happen and you say, well, it'll go away or I can fix it or I can change that. As soon as you feel like you're going to change them, that's probably the wrong strategy.
Yeah,
That's the
you
wrong
gotta
strategy.
exit stage left. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. You know what I mean? And why would you want to change someone? That's not the person for you. If your plight is to change someone, no one is your task. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
just not how it works. Like the biggest thing that's happened for me is forgiving myself for not being able to be with the transitioned person. Like I was
Mhm.
so mad at me for not being able to get on board with that. And it's still sad that two people that love each other so much can't be together, but it's just not my nature to
Yeah, you
be.
have to know who you are. Like, if you know what you can if you can't do it, then trying to force yourself to do it is never gonna work because it's never gonna be real.
Right.
If you don't naturally feel that there isn't an issue, it's always in the back of your head, then it's not gonna go away. Like, like, unless somehow you can evolve to the point where that wouldn't be an issue, but if you know in your heart that's an issue, then you have to deal with the present of what it is,
I
you know?
don't think it's a possibility to evolve to that space. Like I don't think we can evolve into doing something that is not wasn't in our
Yeah,
born nature.
inherent.
You know
Yeah,
what
if
I
you're not
mean? Like
inherently, yeah.
I was
Well, some people
born,
try. I think people
yeah.
try, and then they
It's
find
like
out they can't do it.
like the moment that I'm in that evolved state, I will be in another state of consciousness. That's the evolution. You know what I mean? I'll be dead in a different consciousness. But my nature when I was born was to, my sexuality was to be attracted chemically to someone emitting pheromones.
Mhm.
That's like basics right there. So I just had to like I can't just think about it anymore. And I've tried to have a friendship, um, but our conversations, they don't go well. And then for me, it's like I'm mourning the loss of someone that I can pick up the phone and call and hear their voice, which is a real mind fuck.
Mhm.
Um, but when we talk on the phone, I'm always left with the feeling of inadequacy because I'm unable to validate this person as a woman because my experience with this person is a husband and a man, and all she wants is my validation. And I'm unable to do that because this just hasn't been my experience. And so there's always like static at the end of our relationships because it always comes back to that. And I'm not able to offer that. And that's just the truth.
Yeah, I mean, you have to know where you're at, if to try to push through something that doesn't feel like you, right? If that's not who you are, then that's not who you are. So a lot of times, sometimes in situations like you can't be with certain people. So certain
Right.
people, it doesn't work. And you can see it like with our parents and grandparents, sometimes they stayed together 30, 40 years and it really didn't work, right? But they try to force it to work and then there's all this dysfunction.
Right.
And there's like, and then people started to realize like, I don't have to be there because of the obligation. If it
Correct.
doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Right.
But there was a whole generation that they kind of forced dysfunction and then everybody felt that, well, that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah.
And then they realized that no, it doesn't have to be that way. That you don't have to live in codependency or dysfunction if it doesn't feel right. You don't have to just do it because of obligation or because of some kind of rules. Like you have a right to be happy. You have a right to be your authentic self. And some
Yes.
people don't feel they do, and so
Right.
they feel obligated to like try to save somebody, or somebody's going to save you.
Yeah.
Like, there's the only person that can save you is yourself. Usually, you like you have to start with like loving yourself, with this old story. But like if you don't, your foundation is going to be hard to deal with, right? If you're already broken, how you gonna come to somebody and be in a state to actually go positive?
Well, we
If
saw
you're
how that worked. It didn't work.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
exactly.
it won't work until you have to kind of get to that point where their authenticity, your authentic self, and your vulnerability is all there, and you feel good about it, right? You feel good with that person. You don't feel like that person is hurting you or you're hurting them. That you don't have the codependency. That you have something that is solid, which
You
it
know,
doesn't always happen. There's a lot of
I'm
people that have relationships and it never happens the way that you
dude,
want it.
the gift that I have been given, like to be able to choose me and my wants and my needs, just like, my ex-partner was able to do for herself, like how brave, like because she was so brave for the first time in my life, I know what it feels like to choose me. And like I believe that like that was like the biggest lesson in everything was allowing my needs to feel valid. And that was that feeling in my body. I wasn't honoring what I needed, what was
Mhm.
really for me. And now I can really just sit in peace. So much peace. I have girlfriends all around me that are attached to this toxic guy and this toxic guy, and they are not at peace at all, And I'm like, I just want to wave a magic wand and give you what I have now. I'm just peaceful, and I sit and just quiet, and I don't feel the need to be validated by anyone or anything. And I love that.
You don't have to numb yourself anymore, because a lot of times what happens is, like from your story, you got into situations where numbing was the addiction, because you couldn't deal with like the reality of the pain,
Right. My
right?
solution, my solution has always been alcohol and drugs to numb, to take me out of myself, to deal with the life that I had created around me. But today I am very God dependent. I completely trust that God's got my back and that life is for me. This situation with my ex-partner, I had been focused so much on her transformation and her transition that I didn't realize at the time, which I do now, that it was all about my transition and my transformation.
Mhm.
I'm so grateful that it happened the way that it did, because I never would have been able to sit in the space that I sit now. I would still be running amok on my self-will and trying to control everybody. And you know what I mean? Like I couldn't survive that way. I definitely would have smoked crack again.
Well, it's hard to control, other people. Well, when you seek to control other people, it's probably because you're out of control. A lot of times there's like people who do that are tend to be kind of out of the control themselves, and they don't fully realize that. And so, that's my experience, man. That's maybe not everybody's, but what it seems is like you found your truth, and now you've gotten to this point where now you're in that peace. It's like kind of this Eastern philosophy of, when you're in the Eastern philosophies, there's a lot of time for quiet, because there's a lot of noise. As a musician, where there's all these things that kind of come to our head. But what we find is, as creative people, like if you give yourself quiet space, if you disconnect from all the noise, then the like muse and all the universe and stuff, it comes to us as
Yeah.
artists. When you find that peace, and that peace, for people who aren't creative, it's like it's meditation and breathing and trying to get to that serenity. And a lot of times there's so much noise, even noise in your head, you got to find a way to quiet it so you can actually heal.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, if I was focused on someone else's shit and trying to control it, that means I wasn't focused on my shit. And who wanted to do that? I was so full of shame and guilt for the life that I had created with my children. Like I didn't live with them, nor did I see them for like 6 years. And so if I couldn't focus on somebody else's shit, that means I had to look at me, and that wasn't going to happen.
Mhm.
But I'm so grateful to say that now my oldest son, he's 22, he now lives with me. My 16-year-old son, I see him all of the time. We have amazing relationships. I've had the beautiful opportunity of making amends to them and will always continue to make amends to them, as well as a lot of the people that I affected during my addiction. I'm
Well,
just
you reconnect with the people who love you, and a lot of times there's a lot of love, but sometimes we're not willing to accept love. Like you can be in that state where you don't accept it because
well, I
you
never
don't
thought I
feel
was
yeah, you
I,
don't feel you
I
deserve
never thought I was lovable. I mean,
it.
I never
Mm.
thought I was lovable. I grew up in a home where my dad was massively aggressive, and I just kind of thought that my position in the family was to kind of be like the whipping horse. So I didn't grow up thinking that I was lovable. I just thought I was bad and I was mean. And they literally called me the littlest and the meanest in my family growing up. So if I don't feel like I'm lovable or likable, I'm not even capable of likable or lovable you. You know what I mean? Like, so for me to reconnect with the people who really loved me along the way, I don't understand how my exes can still even tolerate me, but they do. I made amends to my 16-year-old father just Sunday night, and he was just like, Allison, I always knew that the world would change when you decided to use your powers for good and not evil.
Well, yeah, like there's always a state like where your own evolution, right? To in a lot of human revolution or evolution is to actually start to love yourself. That's
Yeah,
usually the mindset. Like you talk to life coaches and therapists, like is that point where you actually say, yeah, I deserve love. I deserve my own self love, and then you'll just find that the people that love you, they always loved you,
yeah,
and though maybe you didn't feel that you were deserving of that love, and then when you realize that that was a lie, there was like a limitation, that was a limiting
right,
belief.
yeah.
And we have to. You never know when somebody's going to reach the point where they realize that.
I mean,
Everybody finds it.
it takes something that really like crumbles you to your core when you're at the bare fucking rock bottom and you have nowhere to go but up. But
Mhm.
to do that, you've got to be brave. There's resilience, and you got to be brave, and you got to start investigating of how did I get here. But if you're never willing to go deep and really like examine your own defective fucking shit and how you show up in the world and drop the rock, like there's so many resentments that are built along the way. I catch resentments every day, but I make amends for them immediately because resentment is like the king authority of fucking your life up. If you're carrying
Yeah.
resentments around, but when you really think about the resentments and you see like how you showed up to that relationship, I always start to realize like, I'm the problem there.
There's
I'm
a
the
lot of
problem.
poison. Yeah, but a lot of that resentment is poison. I mean, it's
Yeah,
poison to your system. If you don't resolve it, it shows up as disease, as cancer, as like organ failure. There's all kinds of things that happen because people don't realize your mind state affects your body and affects your soul and your spirit.
right.
So if your mind state is always in this resentful place, it's in a negativity zone. I'm a Buddhist. It's like the law of cause and effect,
Yeah,
law of attraction. Like if you are in the negative, then the negative just keeps on compounding. If
yeah,
you start to move toward the light or the positive, then the law of attraction, good things start to happen. The love starts coming back. It starts having good relationships, good positive outcomes. You see the future. You're not scared of it. You're
right.
not scared of making mistakes. You realize that mistakes are how you make progress.
Yep.
But if you're thinking about perfection and he's like, well, I keep on failing, so I'm never going to be perfect. I'll live in failure. Well, you have to make a few mistakes to get to be alive.
Yeah,
You know,
success is just a huge lineage of failures. You like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like if you're a creative person, we make mistakes all the time.
yeah,
Like our when everybody that's a musician, what you hear is the result of like hours and hours of work that is on the cutting room floor until you
right.
hear that final thing and people think it's easy. It's overnight success. No, there's a lot of work and there's a lot of failure. There's a lot of mistakes. There's a
Yeah,
lot of things that you don't get right, and that happens with all creative people, but all humans are creative, not just musicians or
right.
artists or painters. You're creative in your life, and you can figure out how to get your brain to be on the right track, and then
Yeah,
get your spirit and your mind and your body in alignment, and
yeah.
people miss the boat when they think it's just one thing.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing. You got to get all of those things in alignment.
Yeah. And it's a journey. Like you never reach the destination. You never get
Yeah,
to a
you're not
point
done.
where mind, body, soul is all in play.
No,
It
it's a
once you're
struggle.
there, you're dead. Now you have succeeded because you're dead. You're going to exist on a different consciousness. You win. But on this journey in our human costumes, we never reach that pinnacle of, oh, I'm here. There's no more lessons to be learned. But
Well,
I'm really looking forward, to the rest of my life. I'll be 48 in December, and I'm really looking forward to what's next. And I have found myself, when I pray on my knees every night, motherfucking giving fucking gratitude that the fact that I am not dead somewhere in a trap house, but just giving gratitude for all the amazing blessings that have been bestowed upon me, and I just like, sometimes I catch myself saying, God, please remove my defects of character, which I would love for my defects of character to be removed, and take away my difficulties. And then I stop and I'm like, ugh, if God takes away all my difficulties, that means there's no more lessons to learn. That means
yes.
there's no more evolution in my highest self happening. So why would I want that?
Well, you're never done until you're done. It's some people feel like, oh, there's like these step programs, and when I get to step X, I'm done. And I try to tell people, you need to be able to do something incrementally every day that's doable,
Totally.
right? That if you're gonna go into a failure loop if you think that after step X you're done, because my experience, you're never done. And
Never
so
done.
and so people who think there's not that there's a not light at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel is like infinite until you're to the next zone, until
Just
you're in the next place.
follow the light. Just
You
follow the
keep on
light.
going toward it, but people want the quick fix.
Yeah.
They think like after step X, I'm done. It's like, well, no, you're going to have to continually be on this path, or you're going to go back to retro. You're going to relapse, right? You're going to go back to this because you think it's not that easy.
No.
Life is never the easy. It's always going to be something that there's fear. There's like you make that mistake, you make that misstep, but that doesn't mean it's over. You
No.
can every day you wake up, you can make a change. You can make something. Whether you're going to do it perfect, I think perfection makes people feel that they can't do it. And I'm much a person that says you don't have to be perfect. You just have to try.
Just have
And
to
if you
try.
try,
There are things the actions that I take every single day, and one of the actions is releasing my expectations of others. Like that is so huge when you can release yourself from thinking and feeling that people should do things or are going to do and behave ways that you think that they should. You're always let down with
mhm,
that. That is something that I'm
yeah, it's
actively
never going
always
to
doing.
work.
Actively always doing. Another thing that I always do is surrender my children to their God's will. I have no control over what happens with my two boys when they walk out the door and get in the car. Like I have to, that's an action every day. I cannot control what's going to happen. And I just pray that God will give me the peace to handle whatever it is that comes our way. Those are two actions that I take every single day. Like surrendering the expectations, I have to do that I'm talking lots during the day, because I always
Mhm.
want to mind read, like I know what the outcome of something is going to be, whether it's a conversation or an event or like whatever it is. I act like I know what the outcome is going to be when I have no idea. Just
Yeah,
have
it's
to
kind of
release
like
the,
you have to live in the present instead. Like a lot of times, if you're in a situation where you're trying to anticipate everything,
yeah.
you're kind of like not living in the moment and letting that moment happen. A lot of people, you're trying to control the moment.
And
So if you're trying
for a boss like me, that shit is fucking hard to let go of.
to, that's a hard thing to let go. Yeah, yeah. It's a
But I'm doing
tendency
it.
to, yeah, it's a tendency that if you realize you have it, then you can work toward, understanding it. Like the first, step is that you understand that you do that.
Awareness.
So yeah, so if once you're in awareness, then
Yeah.
that's like, okay, now you're on the right path because it's not something that's going to go away.
Ever.
It's your nature. So you have to understand your nature and then forgive yourself just because like you're like, look, I don't have to start all over again. but
Yeah.
I can understand where I am and know my nature, and then handle it
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
present moment. Yeah.
That forgiveness aspect has been the key to my sobriety. Forgiving myself for being myself.
Well, I want to thank you because you're a very authentic person. You come to the show, being you, and I appreciate that. It's been a great hour. It always goes back quicker than I expect, but that's what we like to do with the show. We like to bring people, their authentic self of the guests that come on the show and show their story. And you told your story, which I believe is important. It's an important thing to understand life. And every person has a different experience with life. And you've actually, granted us with a lot of insight. So
Thank
I
you.
think that's very important for people to hear that. And I thank you again for being on the show. And it's just really remarkable. And I am very you know it was an honor to have you on the show because I think it's good to be able to be as honest as you are, and I think that's a
Thank you,
great
Phantom.
place to be.
Thank you, Phantom, for having me. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.